The Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, GHS for short, is the result of an international mandate from the United Nations. It offers a consistent and comprehensive system to define, classify, and communicate the hazards of chemicals. GHS is important because it brings changes to our chemical hazard communication systems. This includes changes to the way we classify, label, and communicate regarding our chemical products. GHS will resolve the variations in hazard classification of chemicals, labeling, and SDSs, and focuses on requirements in these three areas. We will discuss each of these in detail throughout the course. Here at Ecolab, we have been addressing GHS internationally since 2003. To date, we have classified thousands of products in accordance. We are updating product labels and safety data sheets and have begun training employees. Ecolab's reason for making this course available to you is clear in our purpose and goals. At Ecolab, our purpose and our goals guide us to do all that we can to ensure our products are handled safely and that our world is cleaner, safer, and healthier. While it is, of course, your employer's responsibility to train you on the specifics of chemical safety in your workplace, we help our customers succeed, providing tools like this training to free them up to grow their business. This Hazard Communication Update course, Introducing GHS Requirements, has been developed to introduce you to GHS and to help ensure all products are handled safely. As a user of chemical products, you will be expected to understand the basics of GHS and how it changes our hazard communication systems. At the end of this course, you will be able to list the GHS basic requirements, recognize the GHS label elements, define GHS signal words, match the newly developed pictograms to their key meanings, and locate key information on the new 16-section safety data sheet. We've divided the course into three sections. We'll begin with hazard classifications, where we will explore the GHS requirements for health and physical hazards classes. Next, we'll introduce the GHS container label requirements. We'll conclude the course with a brief explanation of each of the 16 required SDS sections. Under the new GHS regulation, all chemical products must be evaluated for hazards by the manufacturer to ensure they are classified properly. While Ecolab has always assessed our products for hazards, GHS brings some revisions and global standardization to the way this has to be done. This requires that each chemical product be evaluated for both physical and health hazards. At Ecolab, we also assess our products for environmental hazards, although this is non-mandatory under OSHA's GHS requirement. This is important because it demonstrates Ecolab's standardized approach to classifying and labeling our products. Let's take a look at both of these hazard classes. Physical hazards are more straightforward and are based directly on the SDS attribute data. Health hazards are more complex to classify. We'll begin with physical hazards. Here are the physical hazard classes. Explosives. Flammable gases, such as propane. Flammable aerosols, like spray paints and adhesives. Oxidizing gases, like chlorine. Gases under pressure, like nitrogen, propane. Also, flammable liquids and solids, like gasoline and sulfur. Self-reactive substances are those chemically unstable that can undergo exothermic reactions. Pyrophoric liquids and solids are those that self-ignite if not handled, stored, or used under safe conditions. Self-heating substances and mixtures will generate heat. Substances which, in contact with water, emit flammable gases. Oxidizing liquids and solids yield oxygen, so they can feed fires and explosion, plus might be reactive with water. Organic peroxides can catch fire easily and burn very rapidly and intensely. Corrosive to metals means that it can damage or even destroy metals. Now let's look at the health hazard classes. Here are the health hazard classes. Acute toxicity. Remember, acute toxicity is an effect that occurs quickly upon exposure. Skin corrosion indicates permanent damage to living tissue, and irritation indicates reversible inflammatory effect. Serious eye damage or eye irritation. Note the word serious can be indicative of imminence of harm. Respiratory or skin sensitization. Do you know what a sensitizer is? A sensitizer is a chemical that after exposure to it can trigger an allergic reaction. Other health hazard classes are germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicology, target organ system toxicity. This indicates that specific organs like the liver or kidneys are targeted, and this can happen after either single or repeated exposure. And the last class is aspiration toxicity. Aspiration toxicity is an effect that occurs from entry of a liquid or solid through the oral or nasal cavity into the trachea or lower respiratory system. Under the new GHS regulation, all chemical products must be evaluated for hazards by the manufacturer to ensure they are classified properly. In this section, we explored the hazard classification requirements of the GHS regulation. This requires that each chemical product be evaluated for both physical and health hazards. As a result, some product hazards may change. Reviewing the labels and the safety data sheets for all the products you encounter is important, and the topics of the next couple sections. Next, we'll look at container labels. GHS container label requirements will provide more robust information about the product's hazards. The labels that we are used to seeing, such as the NFPA or Diamond and the HMIS plus others, will become less common through 2015 as GHS labeling takes over. Note, you may continue to see these labels. GHS allows facilities to continue using these as in-house warnings. GHS label requirements will standardize information to be included on container labels. All these label elements complement each other to provide you more complete information about each product, so you know how to handle it safely. In this section, we'll take a closer look at signal words, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and pictograms. Signal words, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and pictograms have been standardized and harmonized and form an integrated hazard communication system. Let's start by looking at signal words. Signal words reflect the relative severity of the hazard. In GHS regulation, we have two signal words, danger and warning. Warning indicates a less severe hazard. Danger indicates a more severe hazard. For products with a low degree of hazard, no signal word will appear. In case you are thinking about the word caution, this signal word has been removed from use. Now let's take a look at hazard statements. When we talk about hazard statements, we are talking about a phrase assigned to a specific type of hazard, which is used to describe the nature and degree of the hazard, such as causes skin irritation or may intensify fire, oxidizer. For example, if you see the hazard statement causes severe skin burns and eye damage, what comes to mind? Where is my PPE should be one of the first things that comes to your mind. Hazard statements are largely standardized by GHS based on the hazard. Now let's take a look at precautionary statements. Precautionary statements are phrases that recommend exposure control measures during handling, use, or storage. As with hazard statements, precautionary statements are largely standardized by the GHS. Precautionary statements are related to prevention, response, storage, and disposal. Some examples of phrases you can see in labels include wash thoroughly after handling. Thoroughly means take your time when washing your skin from this chemical. In case of fire, evacuate area. This means that time is critical in leaving the area in case of fire. You should be familiarized with emergency exits and evacuation routes away from the building in case of fire or explosion. Store locked up means that it needs to be set aside in a controlled area. Dispose of contents or containers in accordance with state and local regulations. GHS also requires pictograms. Let's take a closer look at this element. GHS has 9 pictograms for container labeling. Pictograms include the harmonized hazard symbols on a white background with a red diamond border and are categorized into 3 areas. We'll begin with a look at the pictograms in the health area. These 4 pictograms represent health hazards. If you see this corrosion pictogram, you need to isolate your entire body against contact with this product. It may cause skin corrosion or burns, eye damage, and is corrosive to metal. The skull and crossbones pictogram is used for products that may cause acute toxicity, fatal, or toxic. This health hazard pictogram is used for products that contain chemicals which may cause these health hazards. The exclamation pictogram is used for chemicals that do not fit the other classification pictograms. Products with this pictogram can have these health effects. These pictograms represent physical hazards. As we discussed earlier, the corrosion pictogram also represents a physical hazard in that it is corrosive to metal. The flame pictogram is used to represent these physical hazards: flammable, pyrophoric, self-heating, emits flammable gas, self-reactive, and organic peroxide. The exploding bomb is used for these health hazards. The flame over a circle pictogram represents an oxidizer. Remember that oxidizers yield oxygen that feeds fires. That is why this pictogram shows the flame behind the O. Our last physical hazard pictogram is the gas cylinder and used for gases under pressure. Our last category is the environmental hazards and includes this pictogram, which is used for products that contain chemicals which may cause aquatic toxicity. The environmental pictogram is non-mandatory for products sold in the United States. As of June 1, 2015, the Hazard Communication Standard, HCS, will require pictograms on labels to alert users of the chemical hazards to which they may be exposed. The pictogram on the label is determined by the chemical hazard classification. GHS will bring about changes to container labels. It's important to become familiar with the signal words, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and pictogram that will be used. In order to see how all these elements play together on the labels, here we have an example of a GHS label. It is important to point out that GHS specifies the elements that must be included on product labels, but does not set requirements for format or structure. Ecolab and other manufacturers are free to determine these. The label we will discuss in this training is generic. First, we have the product name and the product code identifier. This includes the common name of the product, along with any other identifiers, such as product number, which must be prominently displayed. The next part of the label is the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party, which must be listed. The GHS pictograms for the product are also displayed. In this example, health and fire hazards. Here you have the appropriate signal word listed. Remember, danger indicates a higher degree of hazard than warning. The appropriate hazard statements are also displayed. In this case, representing the degree of flammability and the target organs potentially impacted. Precautionary statements related to the health and fire hazards are displayed. These statements are largely standardized by regulation, with the manufacturer adding additional information. These statements basically explain the pictograms, signal words, and hazard statements in more detail. This information here is not mandatory, but can be added by the product manufacturer. In case you are wondering, this information may not conflict with or contradict other hazard information. As you can see, GHS container label requirements provide more robust information about a product's hazards. The label elements and sample labels we reviewed apply for products regulated as hazardous by OSHA. As you are well aware, OSHA is not the only organization that regulates our products. Labels required by the Department of Transportation to be included on shipped containers will remain. Additionally, labels for pesticide and biocide products are regulated by the EPA and are not yet changing, nor are those regulated by the FDA. In this section, we explored the labeling requirements of the GHS regulation. GHS container label requirements will provide more robust information about the product's hazards. In the next and final section, we'll take a look at safety data sheets. GHS requires safety data sheets to have a standardized 16-section format. The good news is that Ecolab already used a safety data sheet that was similar in format to the GHS requirement. The changes we needed to make are not extreme. The term Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS, will no longer be used and will be replaced with Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. Here are the 16 required GHS sections. Over the next several screens, we will briefly discuss each of these sections. Section 1 includes the product name and any synonyms, the product's recommended use, as well as the name and contact information for the manufacturer. This is also where you can find an emergency number when needed. One of the most significantly changed sections is Section 2. Section 2 describes the product hazard and includes many of the same elements as the label: signal words, pictograms, hazard statements, and precautionary statements. It is important to notice that the safety data sheet for Ecolab branded products will continue to describe hazards both as sold and at use dilution. This is an added non-GHS required feature. Section 3 identifies the chemical ingredients contained in the product, along with concentration ranges. Note this information was previously included in Section 2 of pre-GHS safety data sheets. Section 4 describes recommended actions that should be taken if someone is exposed to the product. Recommendations for immediate care, along with any special treatment, are included here. This section includes instructions for fighting a fire involving the material, including suitable extinguishing materials necessary. Please note that associates should not attempt to extinguish fires unless they have been trained and equipped to safely do so. Section 6 provides recommendations on the appropriate response to spills, leaks, or releases, including containment and cleanup practices. Like firefighting, spill cleanup requires appropriate training and should only be undertaken if authorized and equipped. This section provides guidance on the safe handling practices and conditions of safe storage for the product. Incompatibilities related to storage are also included here. Section 8 is a very important section of the SDS as it gives you information on how to protect yourself from exposure. This includes appropriate engineering controls, such as ventilation, and the recommended personal protective equipment, or PPE. Exposure limits for the product, such as the OSHA permissible exposure limit, will also be listed in this section. This section contains detailed information regarding the product's physical and chemical properties. This is where you can find information such as the appearance, odor, pH, boiling, flash point, and other key information. Section 10 describes the stability and reactivity of the product. This includes how the product may react with other chemicals, any conditions to avoid, and how the product may decompose under certain circumstances. Section 11 is where you can find more details on the product's potential health effects, along with information on any toxicity studies. Information includes anticipated routes of potential exposure, such as inhalation or skin contact, and potential health symptoms. While Section 11 has always contained some toxicity information, we are now including additional details on GHS-compliant SDS as required by OSHA. In most cases, this data originates from publicly available sources external to Ecolab. Nalco product SDS will see little change in this section. This section provides information to evaluate the environmental impact of the product if it were released to the environment. Section 13 provides guidance on proper disposal practices, recycling or reclamation of the product or its container, along with safe handling practices. This section provides information on how the product is regulated in transportation, such as by road, air, rail, or sea. Common information includes proper shipping name, packaging group, and other regulatory classification. Note that some products, such as this example, are not regulated in transportation. Section 15 offers additional regulatory information external to OSHA. Included may be how it is regulated by the EPA or state agencies. This last section lists additional pertinent information such as the date of SDS issue and supplemental information determined by the manufacturer. For example, Ecolab has elected to list the HMIS and NFPA ratings in this section. Safety data sheets will be more robust and contain additional information with the GHS requirements. Today, we discussed and highlighted the changes GHS brings to our chemical hazard communication system. The globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals will resolve the variations in hazard classification of chemicals, labeling, and SDSs, and focuses on requirements in these three areas. We hope the information contained in this course has been helpful. Visit ecolab.com for additional information, helpful links, and Ecolab safety data sheets.